The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome to the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Here's your host, Jason A. Meiske.
Hello, my friends. It's me, Jason A. Meiske, creator and host of the Sample Chapter Podcast, the show where authors read a sample chapter from one of their books. Now, before I get into today's episode, I want to start by addressing that things are quite messy right now, aren't they? We're in some very troubling times. I mean, good grief. As if our everyday lives aren't crazy enough at the start of this year. And then we had this whole, the COVID scare. In the midst of that, we've had this threat of some killer insects. Now we have this major unrest and riots going on in the middle of a lot of social upheaval. And it's just quite exhausting to think what's next. What are we going to be facing tomorrow? But I think that's why it's more important than ever to remember the thing that's going to help us get through all of the darkest times in life, which is kindness. Me personally, I fully believe that if you just take a couple of seconds and be kind to everybody that you come across, doesn't matter who they are, doesn't matter where they come from. If you take a moment and be kind to them, 99.9999% of the time people are going to be kind in return. It just takes a moment to turn somebody's dark day around. We all have bad days. We all have those days where nothing has gone right. But then, you went through the drive-thru and the person in front of you paid for your meal. And all of a sudden the rest of your day is lifted. It doesn't take much. Check in on your neighbors. Say hello to a coworker that you don't see very often, or maybe that you don't like that much. Take a moment and get to know them better. And as I was saying a moment ago, say thank you. Give a genuine thanks to those people at the drive-thru. Hold the door open for somebody and smile. Or if somebody's holding the door open for you, give them a real smile and say thank you. It doesn't take much to be kind to somebody. And I don't want to get into a bunch of side tangents, so I'm struggling here to keep this on track, and I want to keep things short because you're here for the authors, not for me, not for what I have to say, because nobody cares what I think. I don't care what a celebrity thinks, and I'm no celebrity, so you definitely don't care what I think. But that's the whole point of when I made this show, I did it in the way that I did it. I'm here to bring you authors. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter if you're white, if you're black, if you're Hispanic. It doesn't matter if you're gay, if you're straight. If you are an author, if you wrote a book, and now you're looking for a way to promote it, that's what this show is for. It's a safe place for authors. That's what I wanted to do with this show. Because at the end of the day, all authors have the same dilemma, which is, how do I get word out about my book? And it shouldn't matter where that author comes from or what they look like. It shouldn't matter at all. It should matter what they wrote. You can judge the book for however you want. And that's why I have such a diverse background with this show of stories. And that's why it's also open to all genres. Because I want to have a mixture of titles available to you, just like our world is. Our world is a mixture of people. Shouldn't the authors be? So, like I said, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of things. I just wanted to take a moment and remind everybody, give a smile. Be kind. And we're going to get through this together. And I am a believer that being in the arts, providing people with content like this, whether it's the podcast or whether it's a new book each week, is a way to help people get through it as well. Because it gives them a distraction and something that they can listen to apart from the doom and gloom that's on everyday news channels. Turn that stuff off for a while. And on the other side of that, doing this show, it's really blessed me to provide opportunities to do some things that I, prior to this, would not have been able to do, like meeting this week's guest, sci-fi author Robert Davies, who is somebody who I've come to respect and admire as not just an author, but as a fellow podcaster, and who gives out some fantastic tips to other writers out there in the world with the show Authors and Chains. And I had such a great time talking with him. We were talking about his love for sci-fi, his love for spy novels, and, you know, that mixture of which way to go with his writing, making stuff up along the way. He writes his sci-fi stories that go into the unexpected, and he's also a musician. And not only does he do all that, he's a multiple award winner with a few of his books too. So, oh my gosh, it's a great show. It's a great interview, and I am really thrilled. And man, let me tell you, we're in for a treat again because once more we have an author who provided me the reading. And you know, as much as I love getting to sit down and do the editing on an author's reading myself, it sure is nice when they send it to me already done and edited and ready to go, and because then they're happy, the author's happy, they're getting it the way they want it, and I'm more than happy to put this out there for the way he presented it to me. And oh my gosh, it's so good, so good. Before we get over to that, let's first say thank you to our sponsors and podcast friends, starting with U-Stor-All out of Warrensburg, Missouri. They are the premier self-storage facility in the Warrensburg area with 2 facilities, both of them fully fenced in, gated, more than 60 cameras recording 24 hours a day, and climate control available at both locations. You won't find a better place to go. Check them out online at U-Sto-R-All.net. That is the letter U, STORALL.net. And of course, my favorite writing software and sponsor of the show, Scrivener. I try to write every day, I really do, but over the last 2 weeks I've had a lot of renovations going on with my house, so opening my laptop to do anything other than working on this show has been a stretch. But fortunately, I do have the Scrivener app on my phone, so here and there I can squeeze in a few words at work, even though for whatever reason work has been extremely busy too. But nevertheless, Scrivener is still my favorite thing. I do all of my writing there. Hey, check out this ad for Scrivener and find out how you can save 20% on your next order. Jason here. Hey, I wanted to take a moment and tell you about my favorite writing tool, Scrivener. Now, I know you've heard about Scrivener because their writing software has been embraced by hundreds of thousands of other writers like you and I, from the novice to best-selling novelists. The reason we all use it is because of Scrivener's core concept to bring all the writing tools you use together in a single application. And with tools like automatic backup, character maps, project goals, and let's not forget that amazing corkboard, you can see why I use Scrivener every day. As a bonus for Sample Chapter podcast listeners, use code CHAPTER for 20% off your desktop version. Scrivener writing software, built by writers for writers. All right, thank you so much to Scrivener, and don't forget to get that code CHAPTER when you go to get your own copy of it for yourself. Make sure you also click the link in the show notes for Pop Goes the Culture Network. They have about half a dozen other shows over there like Fanatics and the Fan and the Amazing Nerd Show. And of course that flagship show, Pop Goes the Culture Podcast, who does all of their shows live on Thursday night. Get on over to their website at popgoestheculture.com so you can find out how to get on their cast channel live on Thursday nights when they do their recordings. Finally, I want to say thank you so much to my newest podcast network that I'm a part of, Project Entertainment Network, with a gathering of more than 30 shows now, with some shows in there like Monster Attack, Matters of Faith, Ink Heist, Dr. Galvanic's Odd Tales, and Bazong, just to name a few. There are so many great shows to choose from. So check out this advertisement for one of them, and then click the link in the show notes to find all the rest.
Hello, is anybody out there? Anybody. This is Jim Cobb. If you are hearing this, the worst has happened. I've recorded a podcast at the end of the world and will broadcast it on channel PEN every Friday. It's all about the apocalypse, books, movies, TV, how much food and water will you need in your bunker, all that kind of stuff.
Excuse me, sir. You're gonna have to keep the noise down. You're in a library, and you're scaring the kids. The world hasn't ended yet.
Sorry, ma'am.
Shh. You're in the library at the end of the world with host Jim Cobb.
Fridays, exclusively on Project Entertainment Network.
All right, that is it for our sponsors and podcast friends of the show. Hey, if you are a business looking for a sponsor spot for the show, then reach out to me at samplechapterpodcast@gmail.com. Let me know that you'd like to partner up with me as well. But in the meanwhile, let's get us on over to our interview with the incredible Robert Davies. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Sample Chapter Podcast. Hey, this week I am honored to get a chance to have another one of the authors from the Authors and Chains podcast, Mr. Robert Davies. Robert Davies is a born and raised Michigan kid with an overactive imagination and love of literature that eventually became a disease curable only through the odd, frustrating therapy of writing fiction. He's a Navy veteran, a musician, private pilot, and an erstwhile traveler. But today, he stopped by here. He is our guest. Mr. Davies, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jason. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it is my pleasure. It is my honor. I'm so thrilled to have you here. Had a blast with you here a couple nights ago on your show.
That was great fun. We were. It's been a while since we had anybody on, and you were a hit. It was a lot of fun. We're really glad you stopped by.
Thank you. My kids have been teasing me nonstop that I couldn't keep my cigar lit because I was trying a different cigar. Like, yeah, thanks, guys. That's great. Well, how are you doing in there? You're in Washington now, right?
Washington State, upper left corner of the country.
Okay, and you're doing well? You're keeping healthy?
So far, I wear my little mask when I go outside, and most of the time I don't go outside. So we're riding out COVID, I guess, like everybody else, and trying not to sneeze at people. Otherwise, we're doing well.
Good. Glad to hear it. Well, so you've been writing for a little while now. What was your introduction to writing, or did you have that moment of like lightning bolt?
No, I used to write essays and short stories, and I never bothered to go anywhere with getting them published. It was back in the traditional publishing only days. There was no such thing as self-publications, of course, because I'm a geezer. It's been a long time. So I knew I had a vocation for writing. How well I did it was another matter, and it kind of piled up over time. And my daughter showed up, and I had to raise her. And at the end of that process, I thought it's time to give it a try. It was a can that I'd kicked down the road long enough, and so I had a story idea that was, I don't know, orbiting around in my mind for a few years. And finally, I sat down and started. And it was really weird because I thought, wow, I'm a journalism major in college. I'm good with English, the language, the grammar, all of that stuff, and the vaguest idea how to write a book. I had to think about that for a while and do a little research just to find out what should I be doing, how should I do this, and outline and exposition and all that kind of stuff was alien to me because it was not literature focused. All my writing was news and literary journalism. It wasn't fiction. And so that was my first foray into fiction beyond just the goofy little stories that I wrote in my 20s. And I gave it a try and self-published it because I couldn't get it. Querying back then was maybe at least as hard, if not harder than it is today. So that didn't get me anywhere. And that was when self-publishing first started showing up, and you could do this via Kindle. And so I published it there and didn't do very well because, as is always the case, it's all about exposure, which you don't get unless you pay for it. Yeah. And it languished for a little while. And then through a mutual friend who was an author, I discovered my publisher, BHC Press, and gave them a call, and it turned, and the manuscript was delivered, and the next thing I knew, it was published. And so it's been it was the first of a 3-part series, which I may expand to 6 books, but I don't know. But it was exciting, and I thought, okay, now I'm doing this for real, and it just went from there. And I'm 5 books in now to my writing. One of them is with them at the moment, my yet to be released book. So I have 4 up and running and available, and one of them is in edit now, and then my WIP will make it 6 books. So it wasn't a singular moment. It was I guess a time to get off your butt and do it moment.
That, I can relate to that. That was my moment. I was spending a lot of mornings catching up on my DVR or maybe playing a video game or something, and then realized one day I was like, this isn't going to get my book written. I better do some work.
Yeah, you just get to a point of where you have enough desire to do it, and you try. The desire was always there, but timing wasn't right. And then when the timing was right, the desire had fallen off, and it was sort of a perfect storm of, okay, I'm really going to do this. And it wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to. It took a lot longer than I thought it would be, but I think that's probably true for most authors. Your first book is you're wandering through trying to figure out how to write a book, and
right.
It took a long time. That was nowhere near as efficient as the second and certainly the third and fourth books, but you get better as you go.
Well, I like, I picked up on you write in the sci-fi genre, and I like how when you were describing a while ago the stories that were orbiting around your head, that was a nice little touch. Why why sci-fi? What was that just always a dream of yours?
I think it's probably my favorite genre, that and spy novels. And I think spy novels, you have to have had some experience with it to write them accurately and to do well. So I tended to, and that by spy, I mean espionage, Cold War kind of stuff. That was the stuff that I read when I was young. It was either science fiction or it was John le Carré or somebody in that vein. So I really love science fiction because it's you can go to another place and live through the imagination of somebody else in places that, space by itself is fascinating to me. But when you add the dramatics and the weirdness of nebulae and aliens and wars and bizarre treatment, it just makes it that much more fun. So it was an affinity at an early age, and I think I just thought I would be able to write it better. So that was what took me into science fiction. I've branched out since, but sci-fi is the base.
I really like, at the heart, we're both fiction writers. And what I like about writing fiction is, for the most part, we can just make it up. And sci-fi is really akin to that. Whereas your second love is the spy novels. My second love would be Westerns. But again, I would have to have more experience with that to be able to write an effective Western. I don't think I could do enough character information to cover up the fact that, I know what a bridle is, but probably hooking one up, I would fail and I'd be called out terribly.
Yeah, it's the adage is that you can do whatever you want with the fiction part of science fiction, but you better get the science part right. And that was, I thought I knew more than I did. And when the reality of science fiction is whatever you're doing, when you get to that science part, if you're not steeped in it, an expert skilled in the art, you better be on the line with research. And so the research that I have had to do, it was so tangential. It took me up into dozens of different directions trying to get this one little bit written properly. So it's, and it feels like quicksand. The harder you struggle, the deeper in you go. So it comes with a price, believe me. Yeah.
Do you find yourself having to, or ever having to just like, I'm just going to make something up, like with Star Trek and the inertia dampener. It's like, oh yeah, they can't fly through space and then just stop.
Yeah, I did. What I didn't want was, I wanted desperately to avoid things that were very cliche, and not the least of which are wormholes, because the distance between things in the real universe is beyond staggering. And people who know that, who don't just look and say, yeah, it's a long way, but can quantify it, it's very difficult to get around that. And so I had to make up a rough analog to wormholes, but I don't want to call them wormholes. It's been done a million times, and so I created a network of threads through which you can travel and defeat time space, and I called it the plexus.
Oh.
Because it's akin to a nervous system in its construction in my bizarre head, and each of these tunnels you were able to get into them and out of them simply by the configuration of your engines. I made all kinds of stuff up. Gave myself permission to lie my ass off is pretty much what I did, and give physics the finger. The laws of physics are unyielding, but in the science fiction world, you can say, I don't think so, and do whatever you want. So yes, I have made stuff up, and not as badly as you would think. I tried to stay close to the physical world as I can, but it's no fun unless you start really goofing with it. So
yeah,
I've made it,
yeah, and so long as you keep track of it, so that you don't change it in the next.
Yes, you have to keep track of it. Oh yeah, my notes were voluminous that because you can, it scatters so badly, and you can get the spelling wrong some other time and think, oh, I just blew it. And so, yeah, you don't want to get called out on that. You have to be really good.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to say this was Specimen 959. All right. Well, tell us about this. It was, I love the idea that you wrote this, you put it out, and then it received a second life with BHC. Tell us about this.
It's a story about an ordinary guy, maybe 300 years into the future, I suppose. I don't even remember how long into the future, but we are, as a society, way beyond where we are today. So interstellar travel is possible, and even, I would say, almost rote at this point. Colonization is well underway. And it's a guy who's an ordinary figure, an engineer who works in a repair facility on a very lonely mining world, and he's called to go fix a piece of machinery in another system, and he goes by himself in just an ordinary shuttle. It's not very dramatic. It's all very ho-hum and boring, just kind of like a repairman getting in his truck and driving somewhere. Along the way, he stumbles across an alien machine that he doesn't know about that grabs his vessel and vaults him through one of those little threads that I was telling you about, a long way, halfway across the galaxy. And he ends up in a different place and is arrested, if you will, captured by aliens he didn't know existed, and they throw him into a prison, which is built into a narrow canyon with gigantic walls on either side to make sure you don't escape. And it's a prison that's meant to punish. It's not a prison in our definition or our terms of rehabilitation or anything. It's a pit full of vile people, and it's dog eat dog for survival. And that's what he's found himself in, with no rhyme or reason. He doesn't know why he's there or how he came to be there. But that's what he's forced to survive. And he makes some friends along the way, and they sustain him as they try to find a way out of this prison. And that's where his adventure really takes off.
Wow, fantastic. And that's the one that you've got, you're up to 5 or 6 books now?
No. This is, I just finished the third book in the first trilogy. I'm considering doing another 3 books, but I'm not convinced I'm going to do that just yet. I'm charmed by other things at the moment, so I may not go back. But the third book just went to the publisher at the end of last year, so it's in the process now of being published. The other 2 books that I have are standalone.
Okay. Yeah, I see your Echoes of Escharum.
Escharum.
Okay.
Yep. That's book 2 in the Specimen Series. That's the sequel.
Yeah. And I like how the covers tie into, like what you were saying, with the nervous system of the body, and it's very like, once you get that, you get the cover, and it's awesome. So I'm going to jump over today's book and go into 7th Life of Eileen Lloyd.
Yeah, that's a paranormal romance tale, believe it or not. Don't ask me how I got started off onto that genre. I still don't know myself, and I regret it to this day. But yeah, that's current day, set in North Wales, in homage to my parental lineage. And it's a story about a fella who lives in Wales after inheriting some property from a dead brother. And he just wants to sell the property, but he meets the neighbor girl on the other side of the hill, who turns out to be a lot more interesting than he thought she was going to be. And they form a friendship, and after the friendship gels and they have become very close, he discovers that she has some supernatural kind of powers that defy description. He's not sure what to make of it. He doesn't believe it at first until she demonstrates it, and that gets his attention. And then we find out she has a secret that goes way beyond her telekinetic powers. There's something very different and odd about her. And Aline has lived 7 times, and she is in her 7th life. So we have a little bit of a reincarnation thing happening. It's a different take on reincarnation, and it's very, very Celtic. It's actually it's her original life was as a druid priestess in 800 or so, or 1500 years ago in the 800s. So that's where she started, and now she is in her 7th life, and it's a different world now than it was back in the Iron Age Britain. So, and they have some interesting adventures, mostly because of a few mistakes that she has made with those telekinetic powers. I'll tell you that she's done some bad things with them. So, and they've caught up with her.
All right. Well, I won't ask any questions. That's a great teaser in there, so people can check that out.
There you go.
That's awesome. Well, so then today's book that we're going to be hearing from here shortly, When the River Ran Dry. And this is a 2019 Silver Medal Award winner for SciFi. Congratulations.
Thank you. It was actually it was 9591, my first silver IPI, which was very gratifying. But this one, of all the books I have written, this is my favorite. I like this one the best. But I was very happy when it also got a silver, because it's I don't know why, but I just attached to this story. So.
Well, give us the elevator pitch. What's happening in this?
Something bad happens on the earth. It's really bad. Something that would wash away, I would think, at least 2/3 of the population, leaving those behind. And I don't go into what a disaster it is. It could be a comet or a meteor hitting the earth. It could be a gigantic war. It could be COVID on steroids. Who knows? But it's about 150 years in the future in what we would recall or regard as humanity's second rise from what was left over. My character is a street hustler in a huge city. Most people are gathered together in city-states in the way you would think of the Greek city-states from long ago. That was where the power lies. That's where the populations are. There's not much in between. I call it the area between the cities, which is vast. I call it the broadlands, and agrarian societies live there. People who grow crops or provide minerals, diggers, for consumption in the cities. There's not very many of them. But my character is a street hustler on the surface of a gigantic, sweltering urban colossus, and that is where he finds the things that are mildly to profoundly illegal and provides them to the people in the buildings way up above. It's a bifurcated society. The ruling wealthy class lives in arcology buildings way up high. The common people live in squalor on the streets or below the sub-level, which is really the mechanism that keeps the city moving or going. Infrastructure, if you will. Not a very nice place, violent, dirty. And to escape it, he takes a subscription for an immersive adventure simulation, wherein you give some basic rules to the simulation, and it will create a second life for you. And you immerse into this thing. You sit in a pod, and you kind of go under, if you will, almost to a dream state. And that is where you live out whatever fantasy you have built for yourself. You can be a fighter pilot in the Battle of Britain. You can be, as he is, a soldier in ancient Egypt. That's his fantasy. He wants to be a soldier back in the days of Pharaoh. But the problem is that it's expensive, and he spends all of his dough on this thing, and before he can withdraw and use his brain and not spend so much money, he's addicted.
Yeah.
And that addiction is a problem because he can't leave it alone, and he can't afford it, and he's going down a dead end alley. Then at the end are the people who own the simulation, and they want their money.
Yeah.
Now he has a problem he can't get out of, and that's where his adventure begins.
Oh my gosh. Wow. I love how your books all have that same sci-fi feel to it in one way or another, but yet they go in completely different directions. Was this intentional?
No, I think if there was any thought given to it, and I can't claim that there was, I don't think I'm that smart. I think it was that I let the book go where it wants to go when I'm dreaming this stuff up, when I'm teaching myself the story. I don't I try not to channel it. If it goes off onto a science or a science fantasy tangent, which it did with Seventh Life, I just follow it. And with the story, if it works and I don't throw it away, then I just continued on that path. My series has a story to tell that is in segments, so that's channeled.
Mm-hmm.
But the other stuff, it's whatever is interesting, and whatever, I don't know, the stories develop, I think, of their own accord sometimes, and the direction they go is the direction they go. I just follow along to kind of keep notes, start the dialogue.
That's awesome. Well, I'm aware that you are quite the musician. You got a nice array. I can see you there with the array of guitars behind us.
My guitar's back there.
Yeah.
Synthesizer back there. Yeah.
Wow. Do you have any music online for people to check out?
Not yet, but I will at the end of the summer. And actually with a collaborator, a dear friend of mine named Eric Johnson, who I've known for years, and he's an excellent musician and very smart guy. And we're collaborating on some digital music that is inspired, oddly enough, by Specimen 959 and the characters in it. One of the characters, I should say. And it's kind of new age with an edge.
Yeah.
It gets a little violent, a little brutal. Some of it's very ethereal, and the kind of stuff you get it while you're having a massage. But we try not to lock ourselves into any one or other genre. We just let it go the way it goes. There's no vocals. Neither of us are stupid enough to sing, but I am not. I mean, Eric actually can sing. I cannot, so I don't go anywhere near it. But we'll see how that turns out. It should be ready to go maybe in the fall.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting. You'll have to let us know when that's available, and we'll be sure to share that as well. It seems like you're definitely tapping into something that I've been hearing for the last year and a half. It seems like, since I had my first guest who had tie-in music with their books, and then all of a sudden it seems like every couple of months I'll have another author, they have tie-in music, and then somebody else like, I'm making music, or they even went to a website and hired somebody to make music. And it seems like this is something of the future, that maybe books and music are going to start going together.
It's I think we're closer to that now. The trailer that I made for When the River Ran Dry, which is, I think it's on my website. In fact, I know it is. That synthesis of book and music and even visuals in book trailers, there was no such thing. And now all of a sudden you can find a book trailer for anything. And so that blending of the theatrical and the music with something that started out life as a literary work is becoming a lot more common. And I think it expands it, and it gives the reader, I don't know how to put it, some more tangible bits and pieces of a concept that they can hold on to. Mm-hmm. We remember and we memorize tunes, associate them with things, and it's nice that you can associate them with a book or imagery from a trailer, a video. So I think that's really expanding a lot now.
Wow, that's exciting. Well, this has been a lot of fun for me, and I would love to just sit down and keep talking to you, but I know we both have busy days ahead of us. So where can people find and follow you?
BHC Press is my publisher. All my books are available there on rcdaviesbooks.com. That's my website. You can go there. I'm on social media as well, primarily Facebook and Twitter, to some degree Instagram, but it's kind of not really suitable for book pushing. But I'm definitely there at rcdavies.com, or RC Davies Books on Twitter and on Facebook. I can be found there, as well as on AIC, the Authors in Chains podcast.
Yes.
That we were fortunate enough to have you on the other day. And that's another outlet. You can find some of my stuff. So
and
I'm
you
there.
are, and I was remiss to ask you, you're one of the founding members of the show, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So, real quick, how did that come about?
It was interesting. Ray and I and Glacia had not yet started. There were two other folks who are now gone, and we were kind of blathering back and forth with things that we found humorous in your notification section of your Twitter account. That was how we kind of ran across each other. And I think Ray Bailey had suggested that we should get together and do a podcast. And I thought, wow, that sounds like a cool idea. We goofed around, and it sort of was born a little sooner than I thought. He was kind of being facetious, but he was serious. And the next thing I knew, we were doing these shows, and it just kind of took off from there. But it began with yucking it up on Twitter between the four of us. And now Glacia has arrived, and we settled into a long-term project that seems to be working out very well. And we're having a lot of fun with it. We have good guests on every once in a while, such as yourself. We had a lot of fun, so we keep doing it.
Well, I really enjoy it. I was telling Glacia during her visit with me that I came in around episode 6, checked out a couple episodes, and then was like, I got to go back to the beginning and binge those first few, and then get caught up. I've been following ever since. So running into her recently online and then connecting with you guys has been great. It's just like, oh my gosh, they want to talk to me. This is awesome. So.
Yeah, come on in. We had a ball. We all were in very tight agreement. We were delighted to have you on. That was a really fun show.
Well, you guys made it easy, and I'm just thrilled to have you here on my show. Got to get Ray on here, and then hopefully we'll all do it again sometime.
Thank you very much for having me. I appreciate it, Jason.
Thank you, and you have yourself a good rest of your day. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time for me to step aside and hand the floor over to our guest, Robert Davies, with his book, When the River Ran Dry.
Novum, May 2180. Long past midnight, Ricky Mills hurried from streets still swarming with night people, angling quickly for a row of 3-room flats along the King's Alley. 2 days passed, and still the hot, relentless wind funneled down Waterford Avenue, swirling dust and bits of rubbish into wandering vortices like drunken ballerinas in a wobbly, aimless dance. One chased another through narrow canyons between towering buildings reaching ever higher into the dense overcast. Barely a kilometer from the city's central hub, Sector 4 was moving slowly into a quiet time when the clatter of traffic, sirens, and gunfire seemed to ebb, imperceptible at first, but noticed with silent gratitude by those who worked the late shift. Ricky held a hand to shield his face from the blustering wind, slowing as he turned into the alley. On the boulevard, haunting melodies made by synthesized qanons, ethnic and foreign, yet strangely familiar, blended with monotone background chords pouring from advertisement holograms hovering above an intersection. Beyond, prone bodies of 2 streeties, the cast-off and forgotten ones who walked each day on the thin margin between life and death, lay motionless in their stupor at the edge of a worn brick walkway. Beside them, spent injection ampules for a narcotic fluid neither could resist told of hopelessness and poverty. A preview, Ricky wondered. Perhaps the old god remained after all to place before him a warning with magic hands no one could see. Kelleher, the grizzled caretaker from school, used to say so, and Litzy believed him. But those were days when they were young and no one challenged the word of grown-ups. And anyway, Ricky decided it was unlikely they would notice. Didn't gods concern themselves with better, more important things than street scum lying unconscious in a Sector 4 gutter? He shook away the disturbing notion, but tethered to the life he made for himself, Ricky knew it would always remain close by. When he reached the door of the tiny flat, Ricky turned his head to one side, instinctive and automatic, to listen for their footfalls or the scrape of a knife along rough concrete blocks the way Bartle and Junkyard always did to pull the fear from its hiding place and remind him of his position. Thin, powdery grit carried on the blustering wind crunched like glass between his teeth, and he spat in reflex, rolling his tongue around to gather any reluctant bits before spitting a last time. He held his breath and waited, but there was only the rising wind and a persistent rattle from loose shutters somewhere beyond the darkened alley. At last, a faded green indicator lit with a dull snap as the door went ajar, easing the tension made by hours of another night on the streets. Ricky sat slowly, ignoring his blank vid screen where it dangled from a flimsy metal bracket the maintenance man screwed haphazardly into the wall. Only reruns of old sex shows or the brutal challenge programs would be found there at so late an hour. In the sudden, stark silence, Ricky could feel the muted thump of his heartbeat and a painful throb behind reddened eyes, now pestering, steadfast evidence of his fatigue. Without the wind to draw it from his skin, sweat beaded across his face and neck in the sweltering, stale room, wicking slowly into a worn recliner's threadbare upholstery. Silent, empty walls seemed to mock his loneliness, staring out from the dark through rectangular discolorations where framed photographs or paintings hung long before. The sparse furnishings never mattered to him, but perhaps it was fitting, he thought sadly. A 3-room hovel on the bad side of the sector was hardly an advertisement for success. Instead, it was a place of decay, a forgotten enclave nestled in the bosom of an urban colossus that warranted neither costly renovation nor the trouble it would take to bring it down altogether. As it was for those who lived within its boundary, the neighborhood remained as it has always been, static and unchanged.
And that was Robert Davies reading a sample chapter from his award-winning book, When the River Ran Dry. Don't forget to click the link in the show notes for Mr. Davies, where you can find and follow him, his books on BHC Press, and his weekly show, Authors in Chains. Lots of fun stuff in there. Don't forget to also click the link for our podcast friends and sponsors alike, and hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out next time when I'm back with an all-new author, a new book, and a brand new sample chapter. Take care, everybody. Spread the kindness, and I'm going to see you again real soon.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.